And we are live for real this time. We had some technical issues, but this time, I battled, I won. We're past the technical issues. We're live. And by we, I mean myself, Carey, and Kate. Let's bring them out here to chat about the TV we watched this week, but especially Bridgerton. And you guys know what we should start off with? Other than hello and I haven't seen you in 2 weeks, we should start off with the news. Kate, would you like to kick us off with the news?
Yeah, so there's not really much news this week. I will go ahead and just kind of remind everybody, since the last time we were live, that Moon Knight has started, it's premiered. I have yet to actually had a chance to watch the first 2 episodes that have come out, but it has begun. So that's all I got.
Very excited about Moon Knight. Have not watched it either. There was a little something else that I was marathoning this last week called Bridgerton. But before we get into that, what do you say we do like a lightning round, like 2 minutes, round robin circle of what else we watched this week? And I'll go first and tell you I just finished watching tonight's episode of The Flash, which you two already heard about when we were having technical issues. So I'll toss it to Carey. Carey, what have you been watching?
I have been watching Made for Love on HBO, starring Kristen Milioti. Interesting show. She plays what I think she plays best, which is sort of like a messy character who has found sort of like you would think like a perfect life with a tech billionaire who's created this perfect world for her. But we know what usually happens for messy people in a perfect world. It doesn't always wind up sunshines and rainbows. So it's been fun watching that. Ray Romano plays her dad in it, who is a crazy, kooky kind of dad. And you can tell why she probably has daddy issues. So that's been fun. Beyond that, been binging the first season of Arrow. Crazy action. Stephen Amell pulling double duty with the present time and flashbacks, doing an incredible job. And finished up the season finale of Snowpiercer. Snowpiercer. Everyone should watch that show.
That's
Fantastic.
still on my list.
That's what I've been. Yeah.
But
the first episode.
The HBO recommendation that you just tossed out, it also sounds like it should go on my list because I love messy lead female characters. And we do get a little bit of that in Bridgerton, which we're going to talk about later. I will say, you mentioned you're marathoning Arrow. I have been re-marathoning the latest season of Batwoman to prep for a podcast review I'm recording this weekend. And I have decided that DCCW shows improve immensely if marathoned. Watching week to week, I sit there, I nitpick the quality. I was nitpicking, for example, everything about tonight's episode of The Flash, and I happen to know that you might have been as well. But when marathoning Batwoman, I was just like, this is so good. This is so much better than I remember the latest season specifically. So maybe if I were to marathon The Flash, I would have something positive to say about tonight's episode, other than the fact that they managed to have a mother and daughter on screen. Also, in the DCCW verse, we did not get a new episode of Soups and Low this week, but I'm excited about our Mirrorverse, our doppelgangers coming up. I'm sure you both are as well.
Absolutely.
Yeah.
All right. Kate, other than Bridgerton, what have you been watching or reading this week?
So after I marathon Bridgerton, just like you, I needed a bit of a palate cleanser. So I actually listened/read to about 5 T. Kingfisher books. She does a lot of this like humor based low fantasy stuff with demon possession, magical machines, things like that. They're going around. It's very character based in a very magical setting. There's romance. The first few books were less steamy. The more further I'm getting into the stories, they're all disjointed. They're all in they're not connected stories, but they're in the same universe. The more and more I read of them, the steamier they're getting. So that's fun. But it is a different kind of romance. It's a different kind of story than Bridgerton, and that was kind of what I was going for. It was definitely a palate cleanser, a reset after that.
So let's talk about that, Kate. Let's just use that as a slick little transition. You said after that. Let's find our center and let's start off with a rating as we jump into the meat of tonight's episode, as it were, which is Bridgerton season 2. Let's sit in our peace circle and let's give it a rating from 1 to 5, 1 being terrible, you can't think of anything good about it, and 5 being immaculate perfect. What would you guys rate it?
So I feel like it was 2 different seasons of the same show. Pre-proposal, if you've seen it, you know what I'm talking about. Pre-proposal, 3.5, 4 out of 5. It was pretty good. There were some problems, but it was good. It was we were here to watch. Post-proposal, 2 on a good day. Like that was where my problems arose.
Okay, hold on. Let me not jump the gun. Carey, did you watch season 2 of Bridgerton? And if so, what's your rating?
I have not, but I will say this: when Kate, you talking about, I guess pre-marriage and post-marriage, that's generally how it works for everybody.
Not on good romances. Good romances can be so engaging after the characters get together. This just was not a good romance.
What? And it wasn't it wasn't the wedding, it was the proposal. They never got married.
That is another great point. So, there's the book and the ways that it differed from the book. Let me give my rating first. I would give the season as a whole a 3.2. However, there were scenes that were like a crisp approaching 5, and there were some where I wanted to throw tomatoes at the screen. And that for me actually occurred throughout. As soon as all my worst fears were confirmed and I realized we were going to have to sit through a sister love triangle, like an actual sister love triangle. What did you think of how they changed this book entirely to be a love triangle when it never was one?
I mean, we've talked about this previously with the first book. We're not necessarily against changes, especially with this kind of adaptation. They add a lot of B storylines. It's great. A lot of the Eloise stuff really enriches the story. But when you shift a lot of the priorities and goals of the main characters, it's a completely different story, a completely different romance. And not only did they shift a lot of Kate and Edwina's goals, they shifted the age, which already kind of makes a different precedent. I was okay understanding maybe add a year or 2 just to take the creep off the whole block. Because, yeah, it's an issue that we could address, but it's not a Bridgerton issue they want to address. That's fine. But making them, I think, 5, 6 years older than they're supposed to be in a completely different era of their lives, with completely different goals, set up for a completely different story, and is, I think, in part why we got Edwina that really was head over heels in love with Anthony, which for no reason. When in the book, she was like mildly interested for 0.2 seconds, and then she was like, oh, poetry man over here has my heart, and Anthony just keeps chasing me, and then compromise between Anthony and Kate is what sets off their romance.
I just feel as
I
if they're going to change something in the book, it would need to be for the better. Now, I am open to them changing the book to make the romances more toxic if that makes it more compelling. I expected that anyways. This is from the creator of Scandal, How to Get Away with Murder, and Grey's Anatomy. Okay? I don't expect these to be these flawless, perfect, whatever. It would just need to be more interesting. And I truly can't think of anything less interesting than a sibling love triangle. It's been done, it's so overdone. And furthermore, if I am supposed to believe this is some sort of, like fantasy ending, which is what we sign up for these beautiful fantasy environments and this fantasy family and these fantasy romances, and it's funny, and they occasionally deal with like the B storylines will touch on a social issue or something related to the time, but this is not a dark gritty show that's really diving into that, right? When you have the fantasy at the end of this happily ever after, how is it a happily ever after if the guy's a cheater? Like, the whole premise of this entire thing is him trying to cheat on her sister with her, and then telling her that even if she moved countries, he would still be trying to cheat on her sister with her post marriage. Where's the fantasy? Whose fantasy is this? And have you been to therapy? Like, I don't I
I, because I've seen a lot of people on Twitter talk about that scene and how hot and like the chemistry was, and I will give it to them. The they stepped it up even higher with the level of chemistry, the intensity of the lines, just like the eyes, like the longing stares across the room. They stepped it up even more from season one, which I didn't even think was possible, but hey, here we are. Um, the problem I also have with it is they have these very questionable choices, with us also being told that the characters that are making these choices can do no wrong and are perfect. And with Anthony and him being the most complicated and questionable cheater in fictional history, um, it's hard because I liked him as a brother. I liked his storyline, his relationship with his mother, while him being kind of a bratty little kid about it sometimes. It was interesting. I could be there for it as much as I wanted to smack him upside the head, like I'm sure his mother did at some point. I liked him as an older brother to Benedict, everything else. But his involvement with Edwina just sours the entire thing, not because of his weird view on like he doesn't want love in the marriage, because that was in the book, that was explained. It was a little weird and hokey, but it made sense. I don't like that they have him not listen to every single person in his entire life about how, hey, don't follow her, don't go after her, whatever, whether it be because his brothers are saying, hey, that's probably not a good idea, his mom's like, you don't love her, and even Kate was like, I don't want you going after my sister if you can't love her. And then for Kate to be able to fall in love with that kind of man, it made no sense, because then it vilifies Kate in a way that's so hard to stomach, because she does some heinous things, but all at the same time, you can see she's her heart is bleeding to protect her sister. But she does very like misguided things in that pursuit.
I
But
just
I
think
think her main goal.
I
Go
think
ahead.
with her doing misguided things, it becomes hard to rationalize with her character, because we're told and we do see that she wants to be caring and she wants to protect the family. What could literally be worse for your baby sister than putting her in a marriage where she's not loved? That's so
Yeah,
terrible. And it's not like Edwina was short of prospects. She is very young in this universe still, whatever the age scale is and whatever they've changed it, she still is young. She was declared the season's diamond, all of this. She's beautiful, she's kind, etc. She had no problem getting male attention. She just needed to not be with this guy. And it didn't make any sense that Kate would in any way not warn her about it. The fact that she wouldn't just be like, okay, not being honest with her about the money, that's a whole other stupid thing, but like whatever. Pretend she doesn't want Edwina taking into consideration money when getting married. Okay, not being honest with her about the fact that Anthony is pursuing her is so unfair. What sibling in their right mind, guy, take gender out of it in general, guy or girl, if your sister or your brother is with somebody that is hitting on you, that is coming onto you, that's sniffing your neck and creating these whole we're isolated alone in a room looking like we're about to rip each other's clothes off. You go tell your sibling before you marry them. What, like, there's no time period, there is no character explanation, there is nothing that justifies you keeping that from your sibling. Carey, okay, back me up on this here. And Kate, I know you agree with
I,
me, but like, just outsider's perspective, your sibling is engaged and their significant other is like very obviously verbally and physically pursuing you. Do you have any ethical justification for not immediately telling your sibling?
unless you just have, unless you just don't care about your brother or sister, right? Um, that would, I mean, that
Right, like
would
if
be
you're a
the only
bad
reason to do
person.
it.
Yeah.
Sure.
which is like canonically opposite of Kate, because every other word
Right.
she breathes is what like I just want Edwina to be happy.
Right. Well, if you wanted Edwina to be happy, why are you setting her up with a cheater? Like, I get it. In this
Well,
universe, they haven't heard the phrase, how you got them is how you'll lose them. But, like, the sentiment surely transcends time. Surely. Like, if you could
now
have an orchestra rendition of Ariana Grande for your balls, you can understand the concept of not marrying a cheater. But let's pretend that they're carrying the essence from the books of Kate being okay with like a loveless marriage just for like financial reasons. If that were the case, you would still A, want to be honest about that, and B, not want it for somebody who has other options. Edwina has other options. We're supposed to believe that Kate doesn't really have many other options, although they kind of don't really show that on screen. Like we do see like two other men kind of express some interest in her mildly, right? If you have another option, you
with
wouldn't
the
go with the
kind of
worst
like,
person alive.
yeah, there was a little bit of a hint of like maybe they're just ingratiating themselves to get close to Edwina. But I will say, I will make the argument that up until it was clear Kate and Anthony had feelings for each other, Kate was very verbal about, hey, get away from my sister. Hey, don't get near him. I will give her that credit. And I will even go for as far to say is like, he just wasn't listening to her. Like, I am frustrated by Kate's choices. I am frustrated that she did not find the time, like, did not take the opportunity as soon as she realized, hey, I like this guy and he is flirting back. But I am more frustrated just simply with they already were in love with each other before he proposed. If it were simply like he was still flirting with Edwina and then he also started flirting with Kate and they weren't engaged, um, and then Kate never told her and it just kind of naturally grew into something, that'd be one thing. But there was a very public engagement and then the romance started like intensified, and it was frustrating to me because you could see where Kate wanted to tell her, but you also could see where, and this comes from my perspective more because I read a lot of Regency stuff. Once the proposal was made and accepted, there's also this level of Kate doesn't want to ruin Edwina's reputation by
Right.
stopping the marriage. That's
Well,
my big
she
defense
could
of
avoid
Kate.
ruining Edwina's reputation by not continuing to have
Yeah, I
positive
still agree.
interactions with this guy
I
or by
still
exposing him. I would have
Yeah.
so stood behind a storyline where she saves Edwina's reputation and breaks off the engagement by exposing him. He has a whole
Yeah.
history of like, being a rake, which is like Regency term for being a whore. Like all of the evidence is there. I'm sure plenty of women in London will corroborate. Just explain that he was being a terrible person and hitting on you and be done with it. But she listens to her
Yeah.
emotions instead. Here's the thing. We are going to, for the remainder of this show, still have Kate and Anthony in each season in the background. This is not a Daphne and Simon situation where they go off to their dukedom and, basically be king and queen somewhere. Kate and Anthony
Just for
remain.
Daphne to come back and be the smartest, wisest character in the entire season. What was that? That's great.
She's fantastic. Love her. She did a great job this season. She should have dueled Anthony at dawn and won. But
Yes.
Kate and Anthony are going to be there. Kate, we open this season with Anthony saying that whoever he picks as his bride will be responsible for his two younger sisters coming out into society as well. And then it's supposed to be this cool poetic thing of like, well, we see that Kate's a perfect choice because she helped Edwina come out. Oh, wait. Oh, she might be the worst qualified candidate in the world. She could not like is she going to let me not.
Yeah.
I cannot express how frustrating it is to have this particular kind of toxicity when I, for one, am open to almost all other kinds of toxicity. Like, you could have people be murderers and corrupt, and like I was talking about how there's these whole other categories of like mafia romances and pirate and this and that. It's not about them being a bad person. I don't need my fictional characters to be a good person. I just need them to not be this. I need them to not
Yeah.
be like this spineless. Also, there's nothing
Well,
less hot than somebody being dumb. And they were dumb. That's not forgivable, right? I'd
yeah.
rather they kill somebody.
Well, and you brought up the whole she's going to be responsible for Edwina. I liked the not Edwina, Eloise and Francesca and Hyacinth.
Mm-hmm.
I really liked the few moments we got between Kate and Eloise because they're kind of two sides of the same coin.
Mm-hmm.
They're both women who very much understand how the system is rigged against women, but Kate and how she grew up and everything else very much leaned into I must be really perfect at all things that women are supposed to be perfect at and be able to train my younger sister and basically understand how to use the system to my best advantage while still being a decent person. The things that happen afterwards are questionable choices. Let's take that part out of the equation. Other than her cheating thing, she's a good person and she just wanted to understand how to work the market as best she could. Whereas Eloise sees the world in a slightly different way, and instead of adhering to it and trying to kind of build herself within the confines, she completely rejects the confines of society. And I thought that dynamic was really great. And maybe next season we'll get to explore that more with it being most likely Eloise's season, or at least we'll get more and more of Eloise. I I think that's great, but then also like you said, the big cheating thing, like with the whole concept that she has done this to Edwina, it just puts like a little bit of a damper on any possible interaction she'll have with the sisters.
Well, let's talk about what you just said about next season being Eloise's season, because I want to hear your theories on that and then to touch on some of the B plot lines that were really A plot lines in my heart. So, we have seen quite a bit of setup for the next couple of books in a way that might be considered somewhat out of order, just in that we're starting to get some of this setup in advance of their books. I happen to love that. That's something I'm so in favor of them changing from the books. I'm so down for a season with two simultaneous, romances,
Mm-hmm.
rather than A and a B plot, do an AA plot, like the whole thing, right? And we've seen a lot more setup for Penelope as Lady Whistledown. We've seen a lot more setup for Eloise on her feminist journey, which is so great. Anybody that wants to complain about Eloise's feminism can drop a pin and fight me, because if you're being overly critical about a woman who is pursuing feminism at a time where information was not readily searchable on Google, you're being unfair. We can talk about that another time though. I think Eloise is
That's
great.
so to be specific.
Yeah, I've just seen people kind of hate on her and be like, "Oh, her feminism is, very shallow and uninformed." That's because it's uninformed. It
Yeah,
was
you guys still remember
Regency
last
time.
season where she didn't know where babies came from?
Right. She's not been informed. She doesn't have people spouting ideas at her on Twitter 24 hours a day. She's actually searching for this
Yeah.
herself and like leaving her home to do it. When was the last time anybody talking about her on Twitter left their house to educate themselves on any social issue rather than looking at a screen? Never. So shut the fuck up. Anyways, sorry. I'm the Eloise defense squad. I can't with the
I
unfair judgment of
I
her.
love well, and like I understand that she's a bit over the top, and like that there'd be more like judgment or more like critique in like real time in the story in a Regency setting. But people keep forgetting that this is Regency in the most loose terms
Right.
possible. Um, like in real Regency time, they wouldn't have been listening to a classical interpretation of the Material Girl. Like
Right.
that's not what. And so I, the fact that she's over the top is just matching everybody else at this point, and I
Yeah.
love it.
She is
So
like
I don't
fantasy
understand.
Regency feminist. That is
Yeah,
where that is
because
where the fantasy element of it is appropriately injected. Women at that time would not have had the same ready access of a 10-minute carriage ride and somebody handing you a bunch of books that she had. They would have had to work for it a lot more, but she's putting in some effort. She has a few funny quips. She has, like smart ideas, and the general structure is there. And I, for one, am not watching the Netflix adaptation of Bridgerton for my information about political, economic, or sociocultural feminism. I just appreciate that there is a character representing some interest in those topics, and she happens to be very funny and witty and cool. I just don't think that she needs to be like portrayed as, the next great, political leader or something like that. She's not that. She is what she is, and everybody hating on her is being unfair. Let's also talk about how everybody hating on Penelope is also being unfair because she doesn't have access to the same resources that everybody in the Bridgerton family has. So she has to do what she has to do for money. And if anybody doesn't understand that, that's on them. And with Eloise not understanding it, that is on her. And it's okay that she didn't understand it because she doesn't have the framework to understand it because she hasn't experienced those circumstances. We can do this really cool magical thing where we understand both perspectives at the same time as a viewer of a fictional show. In this instance, I can understand Eloise and Penelope at the same time. What I don't understand is both Kate and Edwina at the same time, because what Kate says and what Kate does is in conflict, whereas what Edwina says and what Edwina does is mostly consistent, just largely uninformed. That's the difference between the two like notable female conflicts in this latest season, and it's why I loved the Eloise and Penelope storyline, even though it was much more heartbreaking to see them fight than it was to see Kate and Edwina fight, to me. Here's a
yeah,
romance, by the way, that I want changed, and then I want to hear your thoughts on Penelope and Eloise because I kind of just like railroaded through like 5 topics at once. I want
that's okay.
Penelope and Colin's romance changed, and by changed, I mean I kind of am open to having it fully stopped. Thoughts?
Me too. So I know at the end of season one, it was like the biggest thing after Daphne and Simon, and I was like, eh. And then when I read the book, I was like, yeah, no, I don't like it, um, because show, Colin, is kind of just there to enter in his like exotic quips about his travels or whatever and to nerd out about maps
He
and
is the
stuff.
most
And
insufferable, like, rich white male
yeah,
traveler of the world. And that's okay. We can have a fantasy insufferable rich white male traveler of the world. I just don't want him paired up with one of my favorite characters. I'm not invested in his
yeah.
romance at all.
Well, and I liked him season one. He was like the cute little bean where when Maria started to flirt with him, I was like, do not touch the cute little bean. And then he comes back and he just won't shut up about his travels.
It's just the
And I'm like,
worst.
okay, man, just the worst. Like, and his decision to go back and see Maria again. I'm like, what are you doing? Get out, go away, go
Let it
home,
go. Let it
let it go,
go.
let it go. Exactly.
He's
But
just I find him so annoying, and I literally was melting in the first scene with him and Penelope this season where I was like, "Oh, they're so cute. Look at how much she likes him." And I'm like completely ignoring him because I don't pay attention to men in scenes if I can avoid it. So
mhm.
as far as like maybe a third of the way into the season, he was really just like a faceless stand-in for Penelope's attention as far as I was concerned. And then once I started paying attention to his actions, I was like, this guy is terrible. And I don't really see how they can rehab him in time, even if they take to, it's not done next season, it's done the next season after that, whatever. I don't even see by season 4 how they're really going to pull a good romance that's really worthy of Penelope to me, but maybe they'll just run with it because they look cute together, whatever.
Well, it's interesting because like last season, I thought Anthony was like the overprotective older brother, but I had read the book, so I was still like I liked Anthony still, and I was still defending him. After this mess, I'm like, um, Benedict, or yeah, Benedict. We really didn't get a lot of Benedict in season one. We got all of him just like being goofy with Eloise and making fun of his brothers, and that's still kind of consistent with what we got this season. We got him painting, but that was pretty much it. And then we had Colin that was so nice last season, and now he's kind of pretentious. And so now the only two brothers I have left to like is Benedict because he hasn't been like, he still just paints and like gets high on accident. And Gregory, because the one saving moment I think for Anthony, the one last minute moment for Anthony that I liked was when he was talking to Gregory in the study. I was like, okay, man, you're not the worst. You've
Right.
made some really questionable decisions, but like you do love your siblings. I'll give you that. Um, so it was frustrating to watch both of those guys kind of get destroyed simultaneously. But like
I
you
can't
said,
express strongly enough how much I'm fine with them being bad people if it was interesting. They could really be
yeah,
truly
it's just not
awful
neither of them
people
are
if it was interesting.
interesting. Yeah. Well, and then on the flip side, you can look at like you said, Eloise and Penelope. Neither of them are awful people, but they've done like questionable things, but you
Hmm.
understand it if you've watched their perspective. So like I understand Penelope needing to do this one for her own mental health because she's like trapped in that family where she's essentially the ugly duckling in a family that's already crazy. She's basically Cinderella, um, in a weird sort of way. She has to deal with a mother with well-meaning intentions that does some things that you're like, okay, um, but she expresses herself and gets out of that bubble through Lady Whistledown and also financially supports herself. She's basically Joe March in this story.
Hmm.
And Eloise wants to be Joe March.
Right.
Eloise thinks she's Joe March. So Eloise is from a situation that she looks at all of her brothers, she looks at the people around her, she even looks at Lady Whistledown for so long with this like contempt and jealousy in this weird sort of situation of like, look at all this freedom you have, look at all this like attention that you get, and you're not doing it with it, like doing the most with it. And she will eventually have to go through the Joe March revelation of like what I want in life and what you want in life are different, but that's okay.
Right.
And just because I don't want the convention doesn't mean you're wrong for wanting the convention. That's where we're headed with Eloise, and I'm very excited about it.
There's also
Um,
like
but it,
Penelope is in a legitimate survival situation, which
yes,
they may not. That's about as close to dark as they've gotten with this show. So we saw the show swerve issues of like the age
yeah,
ridiculousness of girls being marriageable at 15 or 16. We've seen them kind of swerve issues of money, of having to marry for money when you don't really want to, when we're talking about marrying for a lot of money versus just marrying for bare stability. But what they have not addressed is the potential future that awaits somebody who is truly an old hag. And this season, they didn't touch on that with Kate, which, despite aging her up, this idea of what happens to, they referenced she would go be a governess or something like that, but that still requires some level of education and connections. With somebody like Penelope, who has little parenting, little connections, no real reputation, and has not been able to attract a partner due to not being whatever society standards beauty is, and her mom was marrying off her sister to her cousin in a very public and forced situation. Like, she truly has nothing she can do for her survival other than the Lady Whistledown thing. Like, unless she were to try to go become a governess or something like that herself.
yeah. Well, and after all that, after the fact that you basically are kind of heavily, like, it's heavily inferenced that Lady Whistledown is her financial stability in a package, she was still, in a weird way, willing to kind of put that reputation of Whistledown on the line to help Eloise in the best way she can. But she was kind of caught up in her own mess of it being Lady Whistledown, and that title finally starting to catch up with her, but catch up with the wrong person, as well as Eloise's own misadventures and being spotted with the publisher and everything else. So yeah, I see Eloise's perspective of like, you said some terrible things, but as a viewer, we got to see that it could have been so much worse. Like, she said this to save you, and
Mm-hmm.
in hopes that you never figured out that she was Lady Whistledown, so that she would also be able to save your friendship. Um, because she said things that were hurtful but would blow over and that were not going to stick around for very long within the public specter, that would have stayed much longer or even become to a point of imprisonment or otherwise. I don't remember exactly what the Queen's threats were,
Mm-hmm.
if Eloise was kind of claimed to be Whistledown. And that is really what kind of made me really enjoy that, is I very much understood Eloise's perspective of like, you said some terrible things about me and my family and have done so before, as well as you threw me under the bus and you lied about it.
Mm-hmm.
And then I also understand the perspective of Penelope of wanting to protect her friends, of wanting to protect her family financially and by reputation. And it was just a much more complicated and toxic
Mm-hmm.
situation, but done in such an interesting and dynamic way compared to the main storyline being very stilted and like inconsistent. That we're told one thing about these characters, and in every other relationship with their life, it can be kind of seen. But then you get into this love triangle situation. You're like, what are you doing? Why are you doing this?
That was a perfect summary to take us to our 2-minute warning. I'm just going to say that I didn't start watching Bridgerton until it had already been out for about 48 hours. And in those 48 hours, the number one thing that I saw everybody talk about was, oh my God, the chemistry. The chemistry is so good. The chemistry is fantastic. And that got me excited, right? Because, like, that's what I'm here for. I'm here for the romance, and I don't
Mm-hmm.
care if it's toxic or not. But there was something about it that was a little ominous. Like, I couldn't quite figure out, like, what sounds wrong to me about this? And then after I started watching it, it suddenly hit me. People praising chemistry on this show is the equivalent of when somebody's trying to set you up with somebody and they tell you they have a good personality. And they're just like, oh, they've
Well,
got a really good they've got a really good personality. They've got and it's like, what's wrong with them? Like, but they'll only
it's
like
almost,
praise one specific thing about them. And it's like, oh, you're saying they have good chemistry because the plot is shit and their characters are terrible people. So you only have one thing you can rave about, you know? It's like, oh, I've got this
yeah,
guy I want to introduce you to. He has 2 ears.
great. Yeah.
Fantastic.
Like it very much felt like that. Like I saw so many people right by the time before I had the chance to watch talk about how hot the chemistry was and how amazing the show is. And like if you like it, great. I kind of liked it. It was kind of like a this is a train wreck. Let me keep watching
Right.
type watch for me. Um, if you enjoy it and you cannot explain why, that is perfectly acceptable.
Love
If you
that.
just want to say it's the plot and then show posters of hot men, that's great because we are here for that. That is half the battle. But it did sound ominous, and the more I still continue to see it, the more ominous it grows because it is literally just they take clips of the 3 scenes where he's basically like staring holes in her brain, and like
Where he's
it and just talking about
cheating
how
on her sister with
yes,
her. Yes, those scenes.
yes,
Yes.
those scenes. And they basically talk about how hot the chemistry was. I'm like, okay, yeah, cool. But can we talk about how absurd the situation was?
You know,
That in this moment, they had just talked about the sister that he is engaged to. And then he talks about how he would love her if she moved back to India. And he would continue to love her when she's in India. I'm like, okay.
I,
that's just
I'll just say this: Cheating Sisters sounds like the first season of Arrow.
Carrie, the thought crossed my mind several times per episode where I'm like, have I seen this before? Where have I seen this? It was
How
basically
many
that
diplomat?
in this
How
situation,
many?
Kate is Sarah, right?
I would assume so.
Yeah.
Yeah.
Which
It,
is
you know,
high
and
praise.
how many times did Cammie and I, politically in the most delicate way possible, take every opportunity to destroy the sibling relation, the sibling romance, the love triangle, everything about that in the
Many
nicest way
times.
possible. We hated it.
It was so bad and
So
it
bad.
didn't end well, and like they can wrap this up in a bow and have them playing golf in pretty dresses at the end, but she's still with the guy who was engaged to her little sister and cheated on her little sister. Like, congrats, cheers, mazel tov. Like, I
Yeah.
don't know what you want. We're
And I
three
know that
minutes
last scene
over.
was
Carrie, I have a question. And then I
Okay.
promise I'll stop stealing all your time since spoiler, stole about 17 minutes of Carrie and Kate's time at the beginning of this due to technical issues. Okay. Carrie, based on the discussion that you heard from myself and Kate, how likely are you to watch Bridgerton season 2?
On a scale of 1 to 10, 10 being yes, I'll watch, 0 being no, I will not watch. Maybe about a 0.5. But here's the deal, right? All I ask of a show is to either be interesting or entertaining or have a purpose, right? It so I need those 3 things. Yeah, it'll probably be kind of low on the totem pole.
Everybody's really pretty, but they're heavily clothed. So, that can only go so far.
90% of the time, not
Well,
always.
there was, they go from
There
like
was not as much.
heavily clothed to like one outdoor sex scene, like just
Yeah,
because in a gazebo.
randomly.
Just,
I'm assuming by moonlight,
yeah,
probably by a lake.
yeah,
Yeah.
you know the vibes.
In the yeah.
You know,
We
it
were
is what
watching.
it
My mom
is.
just like outside on the concrete. Really?
Someone say a prayer for her back. Anyways, I
Of last season.
yes. I do solemnly swear to not have technical issues moving forward so far as I can help it. Thank you guys for your patience tonight with that. And thank you for talking with me about Bridgerton and what else you have been watching this week. I am very excited to chat later about some more things that I've been watching, including Succession, Abbott Elementary, the Good Doctor, and the Batwoman rewatch. So I will chat with you guys soon. Maybe same time, same place next week.